Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. The Brothers' War takes us back to one of the most pivotal moments in all of Magic's history. It's also the second set out of 4 that make up the Phyrexian arc, as these mechanical nightmares attempt to subjugate the multiverse in the present day. In a bold attempt to express everything significant happening both now and then, this release includes a whopping 40 story spotlight cards. That is far too many to cover in a single video, and in fact, many of them aren't relevant to what you need to know. The goal of this video series is to give players some understanding of what is happening with each new set, so that you can keep up with conversations at the pre-release, or at least recognize some of the characters, locations, and events depicted on the cards in your booster packs. With that said, I now find myself with the tricky job of trying to explain what happens in the Brothers' War, as it is simultaneously both the latest set of cards going into Standard and a marquee event from thousands of years ago within Magic's lore. Usually I would go through the written story, which you can find linked in the description of this video, and compare that content to what we find on the set's own story spotlight cards. There are 2 complications with this. Number 1, the published story is effectively twice as long as usual, because instead of having 5 main episodes and 5 side episodes, all 10 slots are used to cover things going on both in the actual Brothers' War and in the present day. The second problem, as I've said, is that there are 40 spotlight cards, and they are heavily weighted on events from the actual war, which means they don't advance the story in the present day. And that's the one with the characters you probably recognize if you've watched any other video on this channel. So, I have decided, since the present day story is the one connected to a bigger ongoing storyline, that's the one I'm going to focus on for this video. I will save the explanation of the actual Brothers' War event for its own video, although I will address some of the supporting spotlight cards as they come up. But for the most part, we'll be approaching things through Teferi's point of view, as he is the protagonist for this set. The story begins a few weeks after Dominaria United's climactic finale at the Mana Rig. In fact, everything that follows builds upon what happened in that set, so if you are not up to speed on Dominaria United, I strongly suggest you go watch my video on it. Okay, so Teferi and his allies have moved into Urza's tower and are using it as their new base of operations. Other planeswalkers have arrived and pledged their help, including Vivian and Elspeth, who was devastated to learn her old friend Ajani had already fallen to the Phyrexians. A team meeting led by Kaya drops other bits of information. Many planes are already mobilizing to meet the Phyrexians, including Kaldheim and Ixalan, and Mirrodin's resistance is being led by Koth. That's a name we haven't heard in a while, and Elspeth is relieved to learn he's still alive, but doesn't like that he's planning to strike at the Praetors on Mirrodin directly. She tells the assembled group she tried that once before, and it was a death sentence for a lot of people she cared about. The mood set this early on is one of desperation. Planeswalkers clearly want to do something, but they also know the Phyrexian threat is widespread and powerful. Things already seem hopeless, and everyone expects it to only get worse from here. Vivian then shares what she knows about Elesh Norn's plan to use their own version of the World Tree to expand their reach across the multiverse. Remember, at the conclusion of the Kaldheim story, the Praetor Vorinclex stole a sample of the original World Tree's sap, and in the Dominaria United story, Elesh Norn showed Karn that she had used it to grow her own seedling. The Planeswalkers conclude that this Phyrexian world tree will connect the multiverse together and give the Phyrexians the ability to move their armies to any plane at any time without relying on the planar bridge or any other such technology. But it's gonna be technology that saves the day, or at least that's what Teferi is hoping. He's got Saheeli working on a time machine with the Power Stone recovered from the Weatherlight at its core. They call it the Temporal Anchor, and the plan is to revisit the Brothers' War and observe how Urza used his Sylex to stop the Phyrexians, and then copy that move in the present day. Real quick here, the Brothers' War was a lengthy conflict 4,000 some years ago between a man named Urza and his brother Mishra. They were fighting over a pair of magical rocks, and over the course of like 40 years, they dragged most of Dominaria into their quarrel. At the very end, Urza realized something sinister had gotten into his brother, and while he didn't yet know the word Phyrexian, he knew he had to do something to stop it. This led Urza to use a supremely powerful magical artifact called the Sylex, which destroyed Mishra and a good bit of Dominaria, and ushered in a plane-wide ice age for the survivors. While our present-day heroes have their own copy of the Sylex now, they do not know how to set it off, hence the need for time travel to see it done live, in concert. Teferi admits that this plan is like yelling a prayer into a gale, but it's all they've got, and he'd rather fight on with hope in his heart than let his daughter ever see him quit. And so he places himself into the Temporal Anchor. It has a coffin-like box that keeps his body alive while his soul gets ripped out and flung backwards through time. Yeah, Teferi insisted it be that way because he didn't want to be able to physically interact with anything in the past. He's there strictly as an observer. Fortunately for them, Kaya is able to extend her ghost form over to Teferi while he's in the coffin, and that allows Saheeli's machine to send Teferi's spirit back to the era of the Brothers' War. While they are working out some of the kinks in this contraption, the story cuts over to Karn on New Phyrexia. He's on a marbled table being ceremoniously disassembled by a group of Phyrexian surgeons. Or priests? I don't know, man, it's all the same to them. Their healthcare is probably still better than mine, right? Anyway, Tezzeret is there watching, and through his inner monologue, we learn a few things. Number one, the Phyrexians have developed a way to stop planeswalking, at least somewhat. The minerals woven into this marble table are definitely keeping Karn from escaping, and Tezzeret can feel their effect on himself, described as an itching across his skin. Number two, we learn Tezzeret is only here working beside the Phyrexians because they promised him a new body, one made of dark steel, which is much stronger than his current one made of Ethereum. Number three, Tezzeret needs that body kinda urgently because the planar bridge he carries within him is also slowly eating away at his current body. He has to undergo regular cauterization to buy himself time. It's a real Iron Man 2 situation. Tezzeret gets told he needs to deliver the separated Karn pieces to Elesh Norn, and then he'll be given his prize. So he does, and Tezzeret and Elesh Norn talk for a bit. He notices she's in a good mood today, probably because Realm Breaker is almost ready. That's the name she's given their offshoot of the World Tree. Tezzeret again inquires about his reward, and the Praetor tells him, first, he's going to have to go back to Dominaria and deal with the other planeswalkers who are assembling there. Teach them the error of their ways. That sort of thing. This makes Tezzeret realize Elesh Norn will never give him what she promised. She's just going to keep dangling that dark steel body, always just out of reach, until Tezzeret is dead. Or worse, she'll turn him into another one of her drones, like Ajani, who he has nothing but contempt for. Tezzeret plays nice and heads off to Dominaria as told, but internally, he vows to help Urbrask overthrow Elesh Norn, figuring that's going to turn out better for him than continuing to let her string him along for a reward that he'll never actually get. He arrives on Dominaria and meets with Rona, who tells him that they actually lost a lot of their troops in the battle at the Mana Rig, but she's got a special force ready to deploy, and her agents have already confirmed the location of the hidden rebel base. I mean, Planeswalkers. They know the Planeswalkers are at Urza's tower. So the action cuts back over there, where Elspeth is practicing controlling the tower's garrison, which is an army of beetle-looking constructs created by Saheeli. Chandra arrives alongside Nissa. Elspeth hands them both over to Kaya to debrief, and then heads out to the grounds around the tower to check on defenses. Turns out they've got a bunch of watchtowers along the perimeter, and thanks again to Saheeli, they are now armed with energy cannons. Elspeth uses this alone time to reflect on her situation. She thinks about Ajani, Daxos, and Giada. She says some prayers, and then gloomily returns to the tower, where she finds a small impromptu memorial happening for Jaya. Chandra and Joda are passing a jug of wine back and forth as they swap stories about their mutual friend. Elspeth tries to ignore them, but Joda invites her to join in, and she finds herself unable to resist. Joda is the unifier, after all. Chandra encourages Elspeth to share memories of someone she lost, and she describes Venser, who died on Mirrodin, and she's very surprised to learn Joda actually knew him. This is a big moment for Elspeth. It kind of shakes her out of her depression, and she realizes the people around her have experienced loss too. She was hesitant to make any friends here, probably for fear of losing them, but I think this encounter helped her change her mind. So they all make a toast to friends lost. To Gideon, to Jaya, to Venser, and Elspeth even gives Chandra the okay to name Ajani before that little fireball says, "Hell no, we're not going to say goodbye to him, because we're going to get him back." Which is a fantastic bit of optimism on her part, but if you watch my video on who else the Phyrexians are likely going to claim in the next year, you know why I disagree with her. Anyway, the Phyrexians come to the tower, and the battle is on. Elspeth first checks on Saheeli and the temporal anchor, in which Teferi is presently backpedaling through history. Saheeli says they are close to getting the information they're after, but they need more time. Elspeth tells them to bar the door behind her, and then she heads out into the courtyard to activate the drone army. Opposing them is a massive Phyrexian airship, which shrugs off some Thopter attacks, and then wipes out the ground turrets. Elspeth and Joda climb aboard some mechanical horses, also crafted by Saheeli, and dash over to a nearby ridge from where they can observe the battle. They watch as the airship lands and its warriors disembark. The Phyrexian army charges at the tower, eager to tear into the defenders. But Joda and Elspeth have laid a little trap. With a gesture, Joda dispels a phantasmal terrain spell, and the illusion of the lush countryside is replaced by a well-prepared trench filled with sharpened stakes. The Phyrexians are unable to stop their forward momentum in time, and the first wave tumble into the trap, which Joda then lights aflame. Saheeli's constructs are then able to pummel the skewered and burning Phyrexians, but the battle isn't over. That massive airship the Phyrexians arrived in, it suddenly has legs and becomes a massive walking tank that strides over the battlefield and starts closing in on the tower. Joda tells Elspeth he's got one more trick, but it will need her help. It's a spell cooked up by Jaya as a parting gift to the Phyrexians. He says Chandra would have been the natural choice, but in his long life, he has learned fire and light are not so distant, and he calls Elspeth a very bright light. Together, they create a massive, lightning helix, I guess, which obliterates the Phyrexian war machine. Unfortunately, they realize the whole thing was just a diversion, and over at the tower, they see more explosions and flashes of light, which tell them something got past their defenses. Before they can get over there to help, however, they are attacked by Rona, who stabs Joda and calls it payback for his interference at Yavimaya, which was part of the Dominaria United story. Elspeth is exhausted, but stands her ground and manages to knock Rona out, but before she can deliver a killing blow, Tezzeret appears from the shadows and stops her. Tezzeret tells Elspeth not to bother fighting him because she's clearly in no shape for it. Instead, she should focus on saving Joda, while he takes off with the stunned Rona. Elspeth asks Tezzeret why he's sparing her, and he says, small cracks will eventually cause any building to crumble. Meaning, he knows Elspeth will go on to fight Elesh Norn, which is what he wants anyway. The action shifts back over to the tower, where Nissa and Ren are holding off the second wave of Phyrexian attackers. Nissa even pulls a cool move of casting Giant Growth on 7, Ren's bonded tree, which lets them smash more Phyrexians together. But they need help beyond that, and Nissa tries to commune with Gaia, the world soul of Dominaria. At first, Gaia is reluctant to get involved. The Phyrexians have been here before, and planeswalkers like Nissa have made promises before, and things never seem to change, and Dominaria is literally getting sick of it. Nissa says, fine, if you won't help me, then I will do it myself, and goes to rejoin the battle. I guess this display of commitment is what the world soul needed to hear, because suddenly the forest comes alive with elementals, and they overrun the Phyrexians. While speaking with the world soul, Nissa has a grim realization. The Phyrexians will never quit, and so the only way to deal with them is to be just as ruthless as they are. Nissa tells herself when the time comes, she will be the steady hand that purges this sickness from the land, even if it means destroying Ajani or others who used to be friends. With the battle outside under control, we cut back to the tower interior, where things are a little more chaotic. We learn Jace has arrived, along with Nahiri, and soon even more planeswalkers show up, including Vraska, Tyvar, the Wanderer, Kaito, and Luca. They are eager to head to New Phyrexia and launch their counterattack with the replica Sylex, but there is a problem with the time machine. Saheeli explains the Power Stone overloaded and the temporal anchor broke, with Teferi still inside the stasis coffin. This left his soul separated from his body. Jace can detect his mind is still in there, but stretched, as though existing in another place, or time. Saheeli offers to try and repair the anchor and move Teferi's soul back up to the present, but it's going to take time they don't have. Kaya tells the group she is pretty sure she knows how the Sylex works. Her ghost form power let her hear everything Teferi was experiencing during his temporal trespassing, so she's confident they can proceed with the plan. Which is great because the counteroffensive on Mirrodin is happening like now, so they don't have any more time to spare. The group decides to split up. Ren, Joda, and Saheeli will stay to watch over Teferi. Jace, Vraska, Tyvar, Nissa, the Wanderer, Kaito, and Luca will head to New Phyrexia, with Elspeth as their guide and Kaya carrying the replica of Karn's Sylex. Chandra went to Kaladesh to say goodbye to her mom, and so she will hang back along with Liliana to act as reinforcements should the main strike team need it. The story ends with an epilogue. Teferi wakes up on a beautiful beach and realizes he can feel the sand and the warm sun, which tells him he's no longer a ghost visiting the past, though he is unsure where and when he actually is right now. He sees footprints in the sand around him and starts to follow them inland, while hoping Kaya and the others got what they needed, because without a connection to the temporal anchor, he knows there is nothing he can do now but explore his surroundings. And that's it. That's what happens in the Brothers' War, at least on the present day side of things. To recap, the Planeswalkers build a machine to send Teferi's soul back in time to observe how the original Sylex was used to end the Brothers' War. Their base at Urza's Tower gets attacked, and Karn gets disassembled and delivered to Elesh Norn by Tezzeret, who is once again planning to betray his masters. A counteroffensive is arranged on Mirrodin, and our heroes head out, armed with a general knowledge of how to detonate the Sylex, which they plan to use to destroy Realmbreaker, the Phyrexian version of the World Tree, before they can use it to invade the rest of the multiverse. There is one other thing I want to add in here, and that is Teferi's meeting with Urza. During his final trip through the temporal anchor, Teferi finds exactly what he needs, the moment Urza used his Silex to end the war against his brother Mishra. They get to have a brief conversation in which Teferi learns there is no enchantment or spell or key to triggering the Silex. What it needs is a person, and in Urza's case, he filled the magical bowl with memories of the land. Now, when Urza did this, it also happened to ignite his spark, and so he survived the resulting explosion. But the implication here is that somebody is probably going to have to die to set off the replica Silex. Did you get all of that? This set is massive, and while I summarized it as best as I could, there are still some little bits I want to revisit. I don't have a temporal anchor, but I do have a mustache minute. Ready? Here we go. First of all, this story was huge, maybe too big. It tried to recapture the nostalgia of magic in the 90s while also connecting to the modern era of storytelling, and for me, it kind of failed at both. The story spotlight cards here are a joke, honestly. Like Syndrome once famously said, when everything is a spotlight, nothing is. And with a record-setting 40 cards in the set, it is impossible to tell what actually happens here. And in the noise that comes from having so many spotlight cards, we miss out on a lot of the genuinely interesting stuff. There's a part right near the end where Jace tries to read Joda's mind and finds that he can't. And Joda is like, dude, you are not the first nor best telepath I have come across. But give it another couple hundred years and maybe. Actually, Joda is the center point for a lot of interesting connections. He helped Elspeth feel like she was part of the team. He helped Chandra process her grief over Jaya. He promised Teferi to carry out the mission if anything bad should happen to him. I am kind of amazed they put Joda's card in Dominaria United and not here, with him being such a key character and all. In fact, Joda even discovered a pocket dimension prepared by Urza and sealed inside an artifact Teferi brought to the tower. It included notes on the legacy weapon and even constructs of Urza's brother Mishra and Urza's companion Xantia. I have no idea if any of this is going to be relevant to the main story, or if it was just a little Easter egg to show all the ways which Urza tried to prepare for the future. And speaking of the future, I am also really curious to see how they portray so many Planeswalkers being involved in the next couple of sets. Are we going to get a lot of uncommon and rare Planeswalkers like we did with War of the Spark? Or are some of these guys only going to appear in art and flavor text? I do like how they made it impossible for Teferi to meddle with the past. Treating him as a ghostly observer let him get the information he needed without having any sort of butterfly effect stuff happening at the same time. Time travel is notoriously difficult to do well, and while this story got away with it without causing any paradoxes, at least yet, I can't help but wonder if there could have been a less convoluted way of showing us the Brothers' War. As far as spotlights for this half of the story go, I guess they did show the creation of the temporal anchor and explain how Teferi was able to use it to go through time and then get desynchronized, to borrow their term. But they did not show him meeting Urza or learning how the Silex works or any of the plans to move forward with the counteroffensive on Mirrodin. And one big question remains, can a completed character be saved? The story gives us conflicting information on this. When Tezzeret is interacting with Ajani on New Phyrexia, Ajani tosses him Elspeth's cloak to use as a rag to clean himself up. Tezzeret considers this could be Ajani signaling for help. He thinks maybe a part of his true self is still in there. But then Tezzeret decides this would be a really bad way to reveal himself to still have any measure of self-control right in front of all these other Phyrexians. And so he concludes it was not a hidden message. Then, later, when Nissa speaks to Gaia, the world soul of Dominaria, it is made clear that the only way to defeat the Phyrexians is to be ruthless. There's no point trying to save the ones you've already lost. That just gives the Phyrexians more time to spread and do their thing. So Nissa leaves that encounter with the understanding that it is already too late to save anyone infected. All they can do now is prevent any more lives from being taken. But Ryan, what about Halo, the magical substance from New Capenna? Well, we know that it is useful against Phyrexians, but they stop short of calling it a cure. And even if it was, Elspeth doesn't have a whole lot of it. She just used one of her last vials to heal Joda after he got stabbed by Rona, in fact. So ultimately, I think we're still heading to a big showdown that is going to cost lives. I think the Silex plan will not work, and instead, we'll see legendary characters travel up the branches of Realmbreaker to battle the Phyrexians. This was already teased with some of the art shown for March of the Machine, in case you missed it. For this set, though, the Brothers' War, I feel like we just spun our wheels a bit. Yes, the good guys have rallied together, and yes, we've learned the secret to activating the Silex, but we're also right where we left off at the end of Dominaria United. So what happens next? Will Teferi be saved? Will he even want to be? Remember, right now he is unstuck in time, and I suspect he's at Zalfir, where he might find peace finally, and want to stay. What will Elish Norn do with Karn? Really not sure. He's already been corrupted once and then saved, and before you go and tell me that's proof anyone can be saved, let me remind you, he has no organic parts to begin with, and saving him did cost another Planeswalker's spark, so that's not a solution that works at scale. I can only hope this confrontation shakes things up more than the War of the Spark did. It feels similar, with a huge coalition of Planeswalkers working together against a known threat, but I want there to be some meaningful loss of characters this time. But what about you? What are your predictions as we leave the Brothers' War? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya!